clinicians. Okay, so I'll just wait a little bit for anyone who wants to join live. But as you all probably know by now, I'm Sarah, your health and career coach and fellow clinician. And today we're going to be talking about using design principles to design a career that is so exciting to you, that is fulfilling, that is impactful, and that feels just so you. It doesn't have to make sense to anyone else. It doesn't have to, be what someone else would choose to do. But yeah, something that is specifically what you want. So I've got a cool like framework process that you guys can go through. I also did a workshop called Alight. And if you want to access the recording of that, you can go to the guide section of the Facebook group, and then you'll find the Alight workshop. Also, just a reminder that all the previous workshop, other than the Growth Edge workshop, that the recordings aren't in the Facebook group, but the other workshops that I've done, the recordings are all in the Facebook group under the guide section. And then all the other live sessions, like the one I'm doing now, live coaching sessions, interviews, are all in that section as well. So you can go and binge watch a whole bunch of stuff. But the Alight workshop is specifically for there's a lot of questions that you can go and answer that will help you with designing a career that you really love. Today we're going to go through specifically like a design process from it's called Design Your Life. I think they're at Stanford, if I'm not mistaken. Anyway, they have a book as well. I'll link that as well. Bill Burnett, and I can't remember the other guy's name. But they basically used the principles from design thinking and applied that to creating a career and a life that you really love. So it's really cool. So yeah, you can go back and watch the Alight workshop, and then there's also workshops on things like decision making. There's a live session called "Is This Career Really For Me?" So there's a lot around this topic that you can go and watch there. And then we'll get into today's as well. So this is actually an exercise that I use with my clinician clients as well. And for some clinicians that I coach, it's really like this urgent, I'm unhappy, I'm burnt out, I am unfulfilled, I need to do something different, and I need to figure out what that actually is. And for other clients of mine, it's not that. They are pretty happy where they are. They're not seriously considering making any big changes, but there is some level to which they feel like they could be happier or more fulfilled in their career. And so this is useful for both. So I just want to make sure that you also know that even if you're not like, oh my gosh, I need to like change my whole career, this will also be relevant to you. And I'll talk a little bit more about how you can use that for that purpose. And then also, if you genuinely are like, okay, I need to do something different, this will help you figure out what exactly that is. Okay, I also used it on myself. So, as many of you know, I made the switch from being a chiropractor to a health and career coach. Officially, I quit my job in December, or I quit before that, obviously. I gave notice before that, but I officially left my job in December last year to do this full time. And so there was a long period where I was trying to make a decision, where I was trying to decide, is this what I want to do? Do I want to do something else? And I used this process as well. I discovered this process, not as in I discovered it, obviously. I found these people and discovered this process, and it was really, really helpful for me. And so I use it often with my clients as well, and just kind of tweak it a little bit to suit healthcare professionals even more. But yeah, so you're in good company. And I find it a really helpful exercise. Okay, cool. So I just wanted to, just before we start the actual process or the actual design questions, I do want to just remind you that it is so common for people to want to do something different to what they actually studied to do. Um, and one of the things that we can come up against is like, I studied this whole degree, I maybe practiced for a couple of years. Like, there feels like there's already been so much invested in it that it feels like I kind of just have to keep going in that direction. And I just want to say that it really isn't the case. It is so normal because if you think about it, like, we are developing as people, we are changing as people throughout our whole career. So we might actually want something different to what we wanted previously. But also, we didn't really know the realities of practicing in our career until we actually started doing it. And sometimes we choose our career for different reasons, or reasons that at the time made sense, but in hindsight maybe didn't make as much sense. There's an example in that Design Your Life book where he just talks about someone who, like, as a kid loved playing with rocks, and she was like so fascinated by rocks, and she would like collect them and all that kind of stuff. So when she didn't know what she wanted to study, she just picked what seemed like the logical option, because she knew she'd always like been fascinated by rocks, and she decided to study geology. But like, the realities of geology is not like collecting cool rocks. And so she found out that the realities of that job were very different to just having like a natural inclination towards that. So we often discover what the reality is of the job that we pursued, or the career that we pursued, only by actually doing it. So you couldn't have known back then, and you were a different person back then. So it is totally okay that you've gotten to this point and you're like, I don't think this is what I want to do anymore. That is so common and so normal. So please don't feel like you have to just keep going on that train just because it's the one you got on in the first place. Okay. And then what I also wanted to say was kind of similar to how I started this, which is like, it doesn't need to make sense to anybody else. Like, I think maybe some people would look at the choice that I made and be like, what? That makes no sense. But to me, it was just the best decision ever. Like, it was so, like, when I started coaching, I knew, like, yes, this is so me. And I'd never felt that with anything before. But someone else might try coaching people and might be like, this is terrible. I can't believe she likes doing this. And I think this is a mistake that I made when I got into my career, is I was exposed to people who were so excited to be chiropractors. Like, they just loved what they did. They were so enthusiastic about it. And I just thought, well, if other people love this, then I'm sure I can love it, or I will love it. So I also just want to say, like, even if people in your career, sometimes even in your same job, are like ridiculously happy doing what they're doing, and you're like, what is wrong with me that I'm so unhappy? Like, is it just a me problem? But just know that, like, someone else can have a career that to you seems like the most boring or terrible thing in the world, and they can absolutely love that thing, and vice versa. So it really is about designing something that works for you, that is suitable for you, and that really lights you up, even if other people don't understand it or wouldn't have made the same choices that you made. So that was one of the points I wanted to make. And then also, sorry, I'm just bringing up my notes a little bit closer here. And then also, I just want to remind people, this might happen at a later age, but no matter where you are along that journey, it is never too late to actually create the career that you really want. There's a whole phenomenon called the encore career for people in their, I think, like from mid 40s onwards, who want to have a change in career or go in a new direction. So it's possible, it happens, a lot of people do it, and again, you don't need to stay on something just because you feel like, okay, well, you're a certain age now and like, you can't change, or that you've put so much energy and resources into doing this that you have to keep doing that. Okay, so it is really helpful, I find, to have someone guiding you through this process, and to kind of help you see things that maybe you wouldn't have seen. I think some people think that I'm like more creative, but it's just because I practice the stuff, and I'm involved in this world, so I see different ways that it can be done where you might not be exposed to that. There's this study, I think it was done by NASA. Anyway, they went into schools and they saw that they did this test that measures your creativity and your ability to have divergent thinking, which is like coming up with a lot of different solutions for the same problem. And they found that in preschool, 98% of children would classify as creative geniuses. And by high school, that was already down to 12%. So the whole like thing was that the way that we are schooled basically like diminishes or like extinguishes our creativity. And so you might struggle with this exercise to come up with different solutions and to think of things that you maybe never have been exposed to. That is totally normal. It has kind of been engineered out of you. But the more you kind of do this and just practice that creative skill, the easier that will become. And by creativity, I don't mean art. I mean that process of like, let's come up with new solutions, create new things in the world. It's basically, creativity is just taking something that you see in your mind and then creating that in reality. Okay. And then also what I find is helpful, or why I find it's helpful to have someone kind of guiding you through it. This is especially if you are in that space where you really are exhausted, you're burnt out, you're feeling hopeless. It can be really hard to access different solutions, and it can be hard to be creative from that space. And that makes total sense, like you're exhausted. So just know that if you struggle with these things, that makes total sense, and you're welcome to reach out to me and we can brainstorm a few things, we can chat about it, and you can borrow a little bit of that creativity if you feel like you're just not quite there yet and not able to access that yet. And I always like hearing ideas anyway, so even if you're not struggling with it, but you're like, oh, I have this idea, what do you think? I love brainstorming, that kind of thing, so please do let me know. Okay, cool. So the general, like, I want to say, like culture or idea of creativity is just that general framework of being creative, of trying different things, of not worrying about whether something is going to be successful or not successful. You're just kind of coming up with ideas, they call it ideation, coming up with different solutions and trying them out. So they call it prototyping. But you really need to be in that kind of space of just like letting your imagination run wild. We're not trying to immediately solve a problem or know that something's going to be successful. So I try and encourage people to take off their realistic, I don't know, hats or glasses or whatever, and really put on just like a sense of, firstly, I think just relaxing, that it isn't the sense of urgency, but then also just like when we are brainstorming ideas, we want to go as wild as we can. And then after that, we want to hone the ideas a little bit more. We want to prototype them. We want to test them out. We want to adjust them. But we don't want to have that kind of narrowing right from the beginning. At the beginning, the best thing is to just go wild with your imagination. So even if you think like, oh, no, that doesn't sound very realistic, just go for it anyway. This is not the time to be realistic. Okay, you can, if you'd like to, like, dress up silly or put on a silly hat or something like that to like get you in the mood to just like make crazy ideas, then go for that. Okay, cool. So yes, okay, sorry, I mentioned the workshop already. Okay, so these are the three essentially like prototypes and ideas that we're going to come up with for your career. And again, like I said, this doesn't have to be that you're actually wanting to make a change, but I'll show you how this information can still help you, even if you just want like elements of it to get you even more, feeling even more fulfilled and even happier in your career. Okay, so the first one that you're going to design, the first life that you're going to design, or career that you're going to design, is that you carry on doing exactly what you're doing now. Well, let me say not exactly. You carry on in the career that you are now, but you design the best possible version of that, like the one that it would be the most incredible practice that you have ever envisaged, or even if you've never even dared to envision it before, but it has all the aspects that you would think like, wow, that is insane. And one of the cues that I like to use with people is, if you had to visit a practice, and this can be literally anywhere in the whole world, it can be in the middle of the forest if you want it to be, it can be in the ocean, whatever. Remember, we're just like putting ideas out there. If you had to imagine this practice, and you went to this practice, and you walked out of that experience going like, wow, I never knew that that was possible. Like, in my wildest dreams, never thought that creating a practice like that was possible. But now I see that it is possible because I've seen this practice. What might you have seen in that practice that would make you have that kind of mental reaction? So that's one of the questions that you can ask yourself to kind of get that going. And again, that'll look different for everyone, right? Everyone's ideal version of their career is completely different. So the first one, what you're doing now, but the most amazing version of that. And I find also that, or one of the reasons that I think this is so important is because when we are unhappy or we're burnt out or feeling unfulfilled, we tend to kind of fantasize about another career. And we fantasize that this career is going to have none of the issues that we have now. It's going to have none of the roadblocks. It's going to be completely different. It's going to be, you're just going to be so happy all the time. You're going to be fulfilled all the time. There's going to be so much impact. And just, this is what I had to do as well. When I was making the change, I noticed that I was having this like idealized version of being a coach in my mind. And I really wanted to not compare this like ideal version of coaching with the reality of what I was doing as a chiropractor in a particular position that I didn't necessarily see as like my dream practice, right? So you're comparing these two things that aren't really comparable. So we want to kind of bring up your current career to like an ideal version of that and then compare them. Okay, cool. So that's the first one. The second one is your kind of like plan B, right? So if this is the way that they phrase it in the book, is like, robots have taken over, they've taken your job, your boss, or if you're your own boss, calls you to tell you, okay, you don't need to come into work tomorrow. Robots have taken our job. Okay, now you need a plan B, right? And this plan B is usually something that won't necessarily require like a whole long new degree trajectory. It will like, maybe you do some extra training, but it's fairly easy to kind of access, right? So something you maybe already have a little bit of experience in, or that you could use the knowledge that you have with your current career, but in a different direction, for example. And then we look at what would the ideal version of that plan B career be. So that's the second one. And then the third one is like your wild card one. So this is the career that you would have if you weren't worried about what people think and you weren't worried about finances. So not necessarily like you didn't have to work, or like not necessarily that this career wouldn't be for money, but you weren't choosing it for that reason. So like it could be something where you wouldn't do it now because you're like, well, that's not going to bring in that much money, or it would be expensive to do, it would like run at a loss, or whatever it is. It doesn't have to be like completely hobby like traveling, or going to restaurants all the time, or lying on the beach. So I find what's helpful also, because a lot of people will say travel and like being on the beach and stuff like that, and often it's just because we don't have a lot of like free time, and autonomy over how we use that time. So if you think about it as like, okay, you did 3 months of like traveling, you lay on the beach, you drank all the cocktails, and then you started to get a little bit bored, and now you wanted a new career. And that might genuinely be in like something like travel, like you actually genuinely wanted to make a career of that. That's perfect. But it's just to know, like sometimes we just want like a break and like do fun stuff. But think about, yeah, your wild card as just finance wasn't one of the things that you were concerned about when choosing this. It was just like, this is what I would do if I like really had the guts to do whatever. That's what you want to be thinking of for this like wild card career. Okay, cool. So why, how we can use these, sorry, I was like going in two directions with my sentence. How we can use these is, one, like I said, like for some people, they realize like what they actually want to do with their lives through this process, because you map out each part, and then you get to work on like, okay, let's say the thing you really want to do is that wild card thing. Then we get to work on like, okay, what is the resistance there? How can we maybe make a like slow transition to that feels safer? How can we work through some of the thoughts that you're having about that, and maybe it isn't as like wild card as you think it is. I remember them saying as well, like people would be like, they would come up with what they thought was like this ridiculous idea, and then they would ask like some of their friends, and their friends would like, oh yeah, that sounds great. So sometimes it's not as like crazy as you may think, but either way, you get to kind of work through what is standing in the way of actually doing that thing that you actually want to do. And then for some people, they don't necessarily change their whole career to something different. What some people realize is that they can actually do all three of these, which is so cool. You can do them consecutively, so do, what you're doing now, but work towards the best possible version of that. And then if you wanted to, you could do the other career, the plan B career, and then at a later age, you could do the wild card, or, switch around, whatever. Or you could do them at the same time. One could be your part-time, for example. Or sometimes what people do is they will combine these things into like one or more career. And what the version of that is that I find people who are generally happy in their career, they don't necessarily want a huge change. What we do is look at certain elements of, let's say, the idealized version of what you're currently doing, the plan B career and the wild card, and we look at different elements and we see like, where might there be some information of something that's maybe missing for you in your career, right? Like maybe you're a clinician and you're in practice seeing patients every day, and your wild card is like, I want to be a painter and I want to sell my paintings. That's what I actually want to do. If I wasn't worried about money or what people would think of that decision, that's what I would do, right? Then we get to see like, is there an element of creativity that is just completely missing in your current life, right? And how can we bring in those elements of, for example, creativity, in this case, literally art, but how can we bring that into your life? And then you also get to see, like, is it just me craving that element, right? So like, again, this prototyping, it's this idea of, we're just trying things out. We're seeing it in action, right? The same thing as like, you didn't know the realities of your career until you actually did it. We don't want to make that same mistake with something else and thinking that that's not going to be the case, right? We want to create these different prototypes, these different ideas, and then we want to see, like, in real life, how do I actually feel about this? Like, when I dedicate an afternoon to painting, like, do I actually enjoy it, right? And if I have painting in my afternoons, let's say, or in the evenings or whatever, after work, I just do a bit of painting. And after a couple of months, you don't actually feel like you would want to be a full-time artist, but you just feel happy that your creativity is then at least, being incorporate it into your life. And for another person, they might be like, oh my gosh, I didn't realize how much I like love this and have been craving doing this. And like, if I had the guts, I would quit tomorrow and do this painting thing full time, right? People can realize different things from trying those things out, from experimenting. So that'll again be different for every single person. But just generally, you're designing these three things, and then you're looking at what can I test out? What can I prototype? What can I like get curious about and just experiment with a little bit? And from that, you get more information about your career choices, and what you might be missing, and whether you want to actually make a big change. Okay, cool. So I think that was everything that I wanted to say on that. I hope that was helpful. Please, again, let me know your ideas, whether or not you want like my feedback on it, just brainstorm ideas with you, or if you just want to share them with me. Like I said, like I love collecting these ideas as well, because when clinicians come to me, it's helpful also for me to have like different ideas for them. And you know, my brain can come up with a certain amount of things, and I'm exposed to a lot of clinicians who will give me their own, you know, like whole array of things that I can, you know, be exposed to as well, new ideas. So yeah, always love getting new solutions, new ideas, possibilities, and we can help each other kind of like open our minds to that. And just generally make this process like fun and creative and curious, and it doesn't need to be this like heavy thing. It can be about creativity and joy. Awesome. Have a great what is today? Tuesday. Always forget what day of the week it is. Okay, have a great Tuesday, and I will chat to you guys soon.